Welcome to Cinema Convos. This is the show where we bring guests with different tastes in film. And I'm your host, Yash, and I'm here with my producer, Zach.
Hello.
And our special guest, Max. And today, we're discussing the film Boyz in the Hood from 1991, which was directed by John Singleton. It was starring Ice Cube and Cuba Gooding Jr. Before we get started today, I just want to let everyone know that we will get into spoilers most likely, and this is a spoiler warning if you haven't seen the film, and we recommend watching this movie before listening to this podcast so it's not spoiled for you. And with that, we're just going to get into it with our initial questions for Max. And our first question is, what is your first memory or your best memory with this movie?
Yeah, so my first memory, I guess, I don't really have a time frame on this when I actually saw it, but I was fairly young, so I didn't get like the whole like meaning of the movie.
For sure.
But as I got older, I definitely now realize a lot more about the movie and why it's important and like the impact of it.
Cool.
What about you, Zach?
Okay, and well, it's just kind of a follow up. When you saw it, like when you were that age, what was your first impression of it? Like you weren't like old enough to really understand it as much, but like with that, what was your first impression of it?
Yeah, so I guess my first impression was I thought it was a really cool like hood movie, if you will. I guess I really liked all the characters in the movie. I don't know, I never saw really like the kind of like typical hood movie, and that was the first movie I saw, so it was really like an eye opener, I guess.
Great. Kind of a follow up to that follow up. So you saw it. That was your first impression of it when you were young. Obviously, you watched it again recently.
Yeah.
As an adult. How does your view of the movie now contrast from your view back then?
Yeah, so now I guess like I guess I have a better understanding of like the time back then, or still now, of like life in the hood and like what people have to go through. I don't know. I think we aren't really exposed to that a lot, and it's not really like talked about. But like that movie really depicts it really well.
Mm-hmm.
Zach, what would you say was your first or most memorable experience with this movie?
Okay, so I didn't see this movie until pretty recently. Well, sophomore, junior in college. We could only find it on like a streaming service, and it was like a TV streaming service, and it was like censored for TVs. I think we watched like the first 20 minutes, and that's okay. So the actual first time I watched it was actually on an airplane. I was flying back home from Italy. And, obviously on those long flights, you have a lot of time to watch movies. One of the movies I did watch, but I saw it, they had Boyz in the Hood on there. I watched it. I thought it was a great movie. Mm-hmm. Very impactful, very emotional. It really impacted me.
Yeah, so for me, I saw this movie very recently. When you compare it to you guys, I was actually at Best Buy shopping for something else. And I went to like the discount Blu-ray bin, and I saw Boyz in the Hood, $5. I'm like, I've never seen this movie. I've heard it's really good. I feel like I have not much to lose by buying this right now. So I bought it. I went home, and I watched it, and I was just blown away by it. And then I actually watched. Now that was 2019, so it was only like a year ago.
Wow.
And the last year, I did watch it again because I had some friends over at my house who they wanted to watch this movie, and I'm like, I just saw it. I don't know, but I loved it. And then we watched. So I've seen it twice now, so it's pretty fresh. And yeah, it's just the way I think the reason I like this movie so much is that it has a good story. That's important for any movie, but it also it feels so grounded in reality, and it feels like it's still relevant today, as you guys have said. Like this is made in the early '90s, and people are still talking about it because the issues are still very, very impactful. And I'll get more into it when we discuss spoilers. But just for me, this movie it's one of those movies I feel is timeless, and it's very powerful and superbly acted. I feel like all the characters in the movie were real people, and I think one of the big things for me is how in the beginning of the movie they're depicted as actual boys, but even when they grow up to become men, they still have a little bit of what they experienced in their childhood showing up in their adulthood. So yeah, that's kind of my experience with Boyz in the Hood. All right, so bouncing off all the things we're talking about, Max, what do you feel is what are some of your favorite aspects of this movie? Like really anything. Like what stands out to you about this movie more than other movies, I guess?
Yeah. Firstly, I would say definitely the characters. We have Trey, Ricky, and Doughboy, and they're kind of the main characters of the movie. They each have their own kind of like storylines or like own things going on in their life. Trey's kind of the responsible one and is just trying to adjust to life in the hood. And then Doughboy is kind of, gotten affiliated with the gang life.
Mm-hmm.
And then Ricky is, aspiring to be a football star.
Mm-hmm.
And so they each have their own things, but they're all like connected in the hood. So I guess the next thing is like the setting. Like I love that the setting of the hood kind of connects them and makes them grow.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that because, these characters, that if you look at them, they all have, a lot of differences. They have different goals in life. They have different backgrounds. Some of them come from a more broken home than others, but they're all bound by the same limitations because they're trapped in the hood, at least in their youth.
Yeah.
And they all are trying to find a way to get out. Find success by their own definitions. And, you see Doughboy, Ice Cube's character, he was like the more conventional like boy from the hood.
Yeah.
But you look at like Cuba Gooding Jr. or Morris Chestnut. Their characters are they have aspirations in life, and the way they depict all of their backgrounds and upbringing and how it plays a part. I just think there's so many things that apply to everybody. Even if you didn't like grow up in the hood, you could potentially have like limitations that are keeping you from achieving your goals. So I think that's very impactful.
Sure.
Do you have anything to say on this topic, Zach?
Yeah, so some things, just, I know we're not getting into spoilers yet, but I'm just going to say this now. It's not a happy movie. I'm just going to say that right now.
Not.
And a movie about the hood obviously shouldn't be. Honestly, it wouldn't be an authentic movie about the hood if it had a happily ever after ending. And not spoiling, but this obviously doesn't. The biggest theme, I think, for me is the vicious cycle of violence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
That of gang violence. It's just a cycle, and you're kind of trapped in it. And even with Trey, he wasn't like born in the hood. He came in, but he went to live with his dad. While not a native of the hood, he's certainly a product of it now.
Yeah, another thing I just wanted to point out is how Trey moves in with his dad at the beginning of the movie. I thought it was interesting because you don't really always like see strong father figures in film in general, I think. Which is in my experience. So I thought it was interesting to see how Lawrence Fishburne kind of taught him the importance of like hard work and like different things like that. And I think some of the other characters were missing that, right? So I think that was something they tried to point out with just how the movie is set up.
Yeah, I really liked how Trey's dad was real hard ass, but like it's not like he's mean. Obviously, he loves his son. He wants the best for him.
He has the best.
That's why he's such a hard ass, because he's really teaching him. Here's what you need to survive.
Trey, what are you doing? Huh? Oh, you bad now, huh? You bad. You gotta shoot somebody now, huh? Well, here I am. Come on, shoot me. You bad, right? Look, I'm sorry about your friend. My heart goes out to his mother and his family, but that's their problem, Trey. You my son. You my problem.
I think one thing this movie really, really pushes and tries to depict is how there's violence within the community. Like there's like African American violence on others of their own kind. Like they have a police officer who's being very racist in a very bizarre way.
Oh, for sure.
And I guess you don't always see that in these type of movies. So
True.
I thought it was interesting how they decided to depict all. That's why I feel like this movie's so realistic. It tries to depict a lot of different situations that people's realities.
Yeah, no, it is really interesting to point out that this movie came out in 91, and it does take place in LA. In 1992, the Rodney King riots happened in LA. It was the riots over where there was footage of an unarmed black man being beat up by the cops, and then all the cops were acquitted, even though the whole thing was on camera. It really showed there was no justice for police brutality, especially in Los Angeles, and unfair treatment of the black community. And this was in 92. This movie came out in 91, so it really touched on that even before it was mainstream. Because people talk about it now. It was the Rodney King riots in 92 that brought it into the limelight. And that way it was a little ahead of its time.
Yeah, I mean, this movie is almost 30 years old.
Almost, yeah.
So, and we're still talking about it because it's it's just that relevant. Still, unfortunately, it's still relevant. You know, it's. I mean, you look. One of the scenes that strikes me the most in this movie is the very last scene when, this is a fictional story. They make that pretty clear. But then they show like facts, like at the end, like when you see a movie that's based on a true story and you see facts, but it tells you what happens to these characters like later on, and it just makes them feel like real people.
Yeah, I like that about it.
It's not a true story, but it's based off realistic, lives. And then, when Ice Cube says at the end, they either don't know, they don't show, or don't care about what goes on in the hood. It's a very powerful statement that's still relevant today.
True.
Yeah.
And I think that's the movie really sticks the landing with its ending, because that's it stays with you. There's a lot of other things that go on in the movie that are very troubling and very upsetting, but I think there's a lot to think about and discuss.
Yeah, it's not a true story, but it could just as easily be.
Right, it might as well be a true
story.
Like,
how do we know this wasn't? I mean, it's not based on real people, but
real events.
But I think you can bet there are hundreds of other people with Ice Cube's characters, set up circumstances and background that this kind of thing has happened to them. One other thing I do want to point out, though, just interesting, because we're talking about the themes and we're talking about the performances in the film.
Mm-hmm.
This is a really, very obviously dramatic film, dramatic performances. The two lead actors in the film, Cuba Gooding Jr. and Ice Cube, not exactly two names you think of when you think of dramatic acting.
Right.
I mean, this is early in their careers because, of course, Cuba Gooding Jr., after this, he made Jerry Maguire, and then he was in a lot of awful movies, and it kind of fell off.
Snow Dogs,
the legendary Snow Dogs. And then Ice Cube, it's interesting to point out that this was Ice Cube's first ever film role.
Yeah, that's incredible.
It wouldn't be his last, but what's interesting is Ice Cube was acting, but he wasn't really acting. You know what I mean? He was acting, but you could tell he was really accessing something that happened to him.
Yeah.
So these are not two actors you think of for dramatic roles, but it shows they have it in them, partially because I think these two actors can relate to the story and the setting. I think that's what brings these dramatic performances out of them.
I think another thing that is the reason for the acting being so good, and I think this is true for almost any movie, is the actors are as good as the script for the most part, right? And the dialogue in this movie, it feels like there's people interacting, people talking. It doesn't feel like it's scripted. It feels like we're just seeing these people's lives play out. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to ask you, Max, what performances stand out to you in this movie, and why do you think the acting is good?
I actually want to touch on kind of before Ice Cube and Cuba Jr. Just talk about the actual children actors portraying them. I think that they really portrayed just the setting of the hood. I remember the first scene of the movie, they all ask each other if they heard the shooting last night. Mm-hmm. And so that just, they just talk about it as just a daily thing.
Right, regular occurrence.
Yeah, just asking about the weather. So, and it doesn't even faze them or bother them. After that, they go and see a dead body. So that also just the world that they live in is just so skewed, but also it's their reality. Yeah. So I think that really helps grow the characters into what we see after they grow into their teenagers.
Did y'all hear the shooting last night?
Yeah, I heard it. I got on my bed.
Man, you a scary cat. My mama say, a bullet don't have no name on it. I ain't afraid to get shot.
Both my brothers been shot and they still alive. They lucky.
This movie really I feel like from the get-go, it just immerses you into this uncompromising world, and you feel like you can never, if you didn't grow up in it, you can't relate to it. Yeah. But the movie does a good job of making you able to empathize with these characters,
for sure,
and kind of see the world from their lens. And another scene I wanted to point out about when they were children is when, I forgot which character it was, but one of the characters kind of acts out in class.
That was
Trey, right?
Yeah.
And it's you kind of see school is almost like an escape for these kids from the harsh reality they live in. And I think it starts a conversation of if a child is acting out, what can we do and how we should react to it. I think that's another thing that could potentially.
Yeah.
I think that's a point the movie may have been trying to make. But yeah, Zach, do you have anything to add about child actors? Anything?
No. I mean, this kind of also goes for the adult actors. I have to wonder if these child actors could also relate to the experiences that the characters they're playing had.
Yeah, I mean, I think this movie, you could tell that the director, John Singleton, he really wanted to depict something authentic. So it wouldn't surprise me. I don't really know, but it wouldn't surprise me if he sought out to find people who had these experiences. But even if they didn't, they did a really good job of making it seem like they did. I mean, that's acting, right? So we've been talking a lot about the themes and the relevance of this movie, but I wanted to ask all of you really break down your favorite scene in the movie, or I guess if not favorite, because not all great scenes are happy, the most impactful scene in this movie, and why you feel that way.
Yeah. So I kind of want to take the Ricky scene to do its own thing. But a scene that really got to me was actually the very end of the movie, where it was like the morning after the Doughboy and his gang took revenge on the other gang and kind of gunned them down. It was Trey and the Doughboy scene, and Trey was just sitting outside, and Doughboy, is, I guess, regretful of that he took revenge, and he's, haunted by other gang member that, killed his brother. So I think that scene really got to me.
For me, I'm going to go with the obvious one here, and it is when Ricky gets shot. So obviously, I think for that film, that is really where that is the turning point of the film. Especially because if you look at all that's happening, like you look at Ricky's character, he has a kid, he's about to graduate high school, he's about to get a football scholarship at USC, he's doing good, then he gets shot. All that hope dashed in an instant, and that has to be the most heartbreaking scene, and shocking too. Okay, so the story I have. So, you know how I said I was on an airplane watching that movie. So, when that scene came up, when Ricky got shot, I visibly jumped, or not jumped as much as you can when you're strapped into an airplane seat. I visibly jumped. Then the lady next to me had to ask if I was okay.
Ricky!
Yeah, for me, it's, Ricky getting shot was very intense and oh no, this is I don't want this to happen at all. But then I think the most impactful scene for me is right after that, when they bring his body home and just seeing the reaction of his family members. That's just, it's devastating to watch. It's really hard to watch, and it's coming the second time you watch it, and it's just even when you're prepared for it, it really hits you, because it really does not feel like these people are acting. It feels like they've just lost their son or their brother or your spouse or however they're related to him, and it's awful. It's just because Ricky getting shot is just at the surface level, it's an everyday occurrence in the hood. We know these characters and we feel something, but it goes back to the beginning of the movie when they were did you hear the gunshots last night? And it's a real, that for me, seeing their reaction is the most impactful scene, because it's so real. It's a very loud scene, but it's also a very quiet scene in that there's no music or anything. It's just people's emotional reaction to this. That goes into why this movie is so powerful.
Yeah, touching back to that scene, I think definitely when I was younger, I didn't fully appreciate that scene. But now that I'm older, I fully understand Ricky was going places, and now all that's gone, and his family has to deal with it, and his mom takes blame to Doughboy about the shooting, and just the whole scene, all that pieced together is just so much more impactful now.
And so kind of the reverse of what we're talking about, is there a scene or anything in this movie you would change to improve it or make it more perfect in your eyes? I don't know, because this is one of your favorite movies, but I'm just curious if there's something you think the movie could have done better.
So I guess not really the scene, but a character that I thought they could improve upon was actually Trey's mom.
Okay. Yeah.
There's, I think, 3 scenes with her in it. We see her Trey getting dropped off in the hood. There's a scene where she's talking to Furious about Trey moving back with her, and then I think there's a scene where like Trey calls his mom. I feel like they could have developed her character more. I think you can cut out probably the other two scenes with her in it, and just have like her either develop her more or like just cut out the other two scenes. She didn't add much, I guess, to the movie.
Yeah, I never really thought of that, but that makes sense. But yeah, that makes sense. Anything you would change that?
I mean, I don't really have a whole lot I would cut out or anything. I guess, well, it isn't really something I changed, I guess it is, but not something I cut out. So that scene where Trey's dad, after Trey and Ricky take the SAT, Ricky asks Trey's dad, so what do you do? And then he takes them to like this billboard that says cash for homes, something like that. And it basically kind of explains gentrification in the neighborhood and why that they're trying to like price the black community out of their neighborhood. And so I think that's an important scene. I thought it was too short and just kind of a side issue. While I think it's a very important scene, it should have been more intertwined in the story, or just don't have it at all. It seemed kind of shoehorned.
It seemed like with the movie that already has so many themes, that was kind of just kind of last minute like put in there.
Yeah, exactly. I would love to hear more about it if it was part of the story.
I mean, I've noticed not only in this movie, but there's a lot of movies that get into social issues or different kinds of topics, and sometimes they do tend to put in too much, and it makes the movie feel maybe a little unfocused. But for me, I don't know. This is a movie that really floored me the first time I watched it.
Oh yeah.
And then I watched it again, and I still loved it. So in the last year of watching it, I can't find anything I would particularly change. Maybe I'd have to watch it again with more of that lens. But for me, this is a perfect movie in every regard. Acting, writing, directing, storyline, themes. It's a great film, and for me, it's one of my. I think I did my best of '91, and I think it's my second of that year. Actually, my favorite is Terminator 2, but
classic.
but I mean,
classic
both 5 out of 5
Can't
movies.
compete. Can't compete.
But I mean, neither of those were the best picture that year. So
yeah.
Did Boyz in the Hood get nominated for an Oscar?
None of them got Best Picture nominations, but Boyz in the Hood did get a Best Director nomination. On Singleton, just interesting Oscar history thing. He was the youngest ever to get a Best Director nomination at 24, and also the first black director ever been nominated. Only been 3 so far, but he was the first.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it should have been. I mean, I wouldn't expect him because this was a relatively small film. I don't know, small film. I mean, like it had rapper Ice Cube, pretty big deal at the time. But I'm just glad I got what I got.
Yeah. An outstanding movie, regardless.
Outstanding.
Okay, so we've talked quite extensively about Boyz in the Hood, but just to discuss its impact further, I want to ask either of you: are there any films that give off a similar vibe, or kind of make you feel a similar way when you watch them?
The movie I have, it's not like in any way related. I mean, it is, but it isn't related to Boyz in the Hood. It's the movie Friday with Ice Cube and
Chris Tucker, I think?
Chris Tucker.
Chris Tucker. I guess the story is just not even relatable.
Right, and it's a comedy film.
Yeah, it's a comedy film, but I think the overall setting of the film and just like their lives and what they have to kind of go through. There's like one bully in the movie I remember. I guess that kind of relates to Boyz in the Hood. So that film I think really kind of.
Okay. Yeah, I've yet to see Friday. I've heard it's really good.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. It's a good comedy.
Okay, so I guess for me, so I guess I have 2. I guess this is kind of a more recent film, and not. I guess it has some parallels. I guess I would have to say Straight Outta Compton, just kind of because, this movie stars Ice Cube, and Straight Outta Compton is about, in part, Ice Cube. It does touch on life in the hood and just kind of upbringing, and also the movie it touches on the kind of perils of the hip hop industry, and there are certain scenes, like there's one scene where they're walking out of the recording studio, and all 5 members of 5 members of NWA are accosted by the cops. It's sort of interesting that stuff, that kind of racial profiling stuff that you would see in a movie like Boyz in the Hood, but this, I don't know, we touched on it a little bit. Another answer I'd have is John Singleton, director. He did another movie that's called Higher Learning. It's about 3 college freshmen in their first semester of college. Anyway, it just shows kind of the different paths you take, and Ice Cube's also in that, but he's not one of the 3 main. But not necessarily as similar as like some of Straight Outta Compton, not similar themes, but it does have a similar vibe, I guess, because it is directed by John Singleton. But it really does give you that vibe of Boyz in the Hood.
Yeah, I can see how I've seen Straight Outta Compton. I can see how there are some similar elements. I mean, it is about NWA, which Ice Cube was a part of, and it's kind of funny. The movies you guys mentioned are Boyz in the. I mean, you mentioned Straight Outta Compton. Max mentioned Friday, and obviously like both Boyz in the Hood and Friday come up in Straight Outta Compton because Ice Cube reaches that point in his career in the story, and it's just kind of funny how people reacted to him making those films because they're both completely different, but like also we were able to find some kind of similarity in them. Okay, so we're reaching the end of our discussion today. Last thing I want to ask is, if you had to convince someone to watch this movie who hasn't seen it yet, and maybe might not be particularly interested in the film, how would you sell this movie? How would you convince them to watch it? So we'll start with you, Max.
Yeah, I would definitely convince someone to watch the movie based on the characters and based on the setting. The characters in the movie, I think, really drive the movie home. I think they basically make the movie. And I like that there's 3 storylines between them all. They each aspire to be something. And then, of course, the setting of the hood is, a, I guess, taboo topic. None of us really are very familiar with it. No. So, we get to see, life in the hood and how they deal with it. Just overall, I guess the movie is just, boys in the hood and, what they have to deal with and, live with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess to sell this movie, this is kind of a cliche thing, but it's important. Want to see an insight about people living in the hood, growing up in the hood. This isn't every hood story. There's obviously it's not the same for everyone, but this is a little glimpse, even though it's a fictional story.
Yeah, it seems real though.
Yeah, even though it's a fictional story, it might as well not be. So yeah, I would just sell. It is important, and it's a great insight into the sad reality of these kinds of neighborhoods.
Yeah, I mean, I would kind of bring up what both of you have said, and really, I mean, obviously, if I'm going to tell someone to watch this movie, I am going to preface it with that it's not an easy movie, and you shouldn't watch it casually. Don't be passively watching it, actively watch it, because there's a lot to take away. But other than that, I would say it's one of the most realistic movies I've ever seen, at least recently. Sure. I mean, for me recently, it's an older movie, but it was made before I was born. But yes. I would just say if you want to see a realistic portrayal of youth in the hood, there's I can't think of a better movie because I haven't seen a lot of them. But as of right now, this is the best one.
Yeah. I would also say that this is not a movie that you should watch on an airplane. It's not a casual watch. Not a casual watch.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Max.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks for listening, everyone. And if you're interested to see more, give us a follow. And from all of us at Cinema Convos, we hope that you tune in next time.